How did that other video come out? The other video you shot?
It's fine. Like
Okay.
I'm still like editing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
And you're going to add subtitles or something? Yeah. Thanks for doing that. Yep.
Oh, it's the Thursday afternoon. I want to be here, but I have a student I have to meet at 1 o'clock,
Oh, okay,
so I don't
okay.
want you to
Sure,
have
sure,
to-
sure, sure. That's fine. That's fine. He's taking a video, Johnny. They're taking a video. So, so ask him where's best to sit. I mean, you know, because just check with Jay and Johnny. They'll tell you.
Today?
Penny has to leave. She has to leave around 1. Where should she sit? Here, maybe?
Yeah, I'll go behind you.
Or you know, you put this here. And I'm going to close this door anyway. So, okay, and I'll close the. I'm going to close the door anyway. It's quieter, I find.
Okay.
Okay,
You
so
want this open?
for now you can leave it open. I mean, maybe when I begin. Okay, well,
I didn't want to miss it, but
sure,
the
sure,
student
sure.
said that. I tried to say not today, but they said
That's
no.
not a problem. I understand.
I have
I
a lot of
understand.
my students.
I understand. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that can stay for now. Okay.
Everybody sign?
Okay, well, whenever you're ready, we can begin. You tell me. Okay? Okay? I can shut this door so it's quieter in here. All right? Okay? Okay? All right, okay. Okay, so thank you for turning out. This is not so much a talk, it's more a conversation. I know it was advertised as a talk. I saw an email that was sent out, but it's really not a talk. All I have is 1 page of handwritten notes. I'm just going to sort of just look at them from time to time. So really the class is this presentation is a plug for my class next semester, Philosophy 3722. That's Asian philosophy. Okay, and the class meets Tuesday, Thursdays. Oops, this little thing is. Here we go. 11 to 12:15. Okay, and one more thing I should say here. There is a class we're offering right after this. This class counts towards our religion program. Okay, so if you want to pick up a minor in religion, right, in addition to your philosophy major, okay, you can take this class. We are offering another class right after this next semester. That's Thursday afternoons, 12:50 to 3:20. My colleague Andrew Orlig will teach that. It's philosophy of religion. Okay, so what you can do is take my class Thursday afternoons, grab a quick bite, and then go to Professor Orlig's class, philosophy of religion. The two classes go well together. They both count towards our religion program. As it happens, both Andrew Orlig and I are affiliated with our religion program, okay, which is in the first floor of Boylan Hall. Okay, so there's a little plug there for that other class. Okay, okay. So please feel free to interrupt me at any time. Ask me questions. Okay, so I'm very happy to answer your questions. Okay, so like I said, this is not a talk per se. It's not that formal. It's more informal. I have a bad habit of walking around when I talk. So I don't want to sit down. I'll write a lot on the board, okay, as things come up. Okay, so one thing I want to say is we live in an age of narrow over-specialization. Okay, it's not uncommon to find philosophers, my generation, okay, philosophers my age, who might specialize, let's say, I want to take an example that won't offend anyone, okay? So let me take a non-controversial example. Okay? I'll mention a philosopher that most of you may not have heard of. Let me see if anyone's heard of this guy. Marsilio Ficino. Has anyone heard of this philosopher? Okay. Anyone know when he lived, roughly?
We don't know.
Okay, okay, I'll give you his dates. He's an Italian Renaissance philosopher. If I remember his dates correctly, it's 1433 to 1499. Okay, all right. So it's not uncommon, for example, someone might specialize in Marsilio Ficino. They wrote a book on him. Then they edit a collection of essays on Marsilio Ficino a few years later. Then they translate all of Marsilio Ficino's collected works. Okay, and that's what they do. And I'm all for depth. Depth is very good, but breadth also matters. It's good to have both breadth and depth. So I urge you to broaden your horizons. This class, Phil 3722, will broaden your horizons. Okay. Something else I want to mention is we do a lot of Western philosophy around here. That's absolutely fine. I do a lot of Western philosophy too. I teach metaphysics regularly. From time to time, I teach ancient philosophy or modern philosophy. Okay, so but there's also some good things here in philosophies outside the West. Okay, in Eastern philosophies, Asian philosophies. Okay, so I urge you to do that. You'll learn in this class about classical Chinese and Indian philosophies. They're fascinating in and of themselves. They're saying a lot of good things, a lot of wisdom in these views. There's also things we should question. Okay, we shouldn't accept their views as the gospel truth. Just like when we read Plato or Aristotle or Hume or Kant or Quine, we question them, right? Same way we should question them. So there's a lot of wisdom in these views, but there's things we should question too. And these views are worth learning about also as a means to an end. Okay, let me just say a couple quick things here. Both China and India account for a large amount of the world's population today. China, if I remember correctly, has something like 1.4 billion people. Okay, India has something like 1.3. Chalk keeps. Okay, so now you add these two together, that's about 2.7 billion. Okay, I believe on the planet today we have something like 7.7 billion, something like that, 7.5, something like that. Okay, so you do the math here. That's well over 1/3 of humanity today lives in China and India put together. Okay, something else. These countries are going to matter in the 21st century. I'll be gone by mid-century or so. I won't be around, most likely. Okay, you guys, most of you, will still be here. Okay, China has the world's second largest economy in the world today. Okay, some people have predicted that it'll surpass the United States at some point this century. Who knows if it'll happen? Okay, but they're the second largest right now. India has the fourth largest economy in the world today. Okay, it's going to matter to know something about their philosophies, their histories, their cultures, especially if you want to do business in China and India. If you have friends who are business majors. I had a student a few years back who took this class with me, and he was a business major, he wanted to get an MBA, and he said, I want to learn about China and India because eventually I want to go there and do business with them, travel them. I said, yeah, it's useful to learn about these things. So it's going to be useful to you, besides the fact that this class is a lot of fun, there's a lot of wisdom in these views, there's a lot of good things. Yeah. 3 credits. Yeah. Okay. That's what it is. Okay. Okay. Now let me stop here. Any questions so far? By the way, we have a great cookie display here. Maybe you should take some pictures of the cookie display and drinks. Do help yourself. Yes, go ahead.
So who has the largest economy in America?
Yes, we have the largest economy in the world right now. Yes. Okay. What's going to happen? I don't know. With the trade wars and this and that, what's going to happen? I don't know. Okay. So we'll see how things turn out. But okay. Okay, that's a good question. I mentioned China has the largest population in the world. India has the second largest. Which country has the third largest population in the world? Yes, the United States. That's right. Okay, and how many people do we have? Who can tell me? I believe it's something like 330 million people. Okay, we have a census next year, so we'll know for sure, roughly. Okay, how many people there are? Okay, but it's something like 330 million people. Okay, so that's you can see already, right? They are well over 1 billion. Okay, both these countries. Okay, so that's going to matter. Okay, now I also want to tell you that these civilizations are amongst the oldest civilizations of the world. They go back to before Christ. They go back even before Socrates. Okay, so let me give you some dates here, just to orient you here. Let's look at ancient Greece here very quickly. Let's look at China. Let's look at India. Okay, so Socrates. Anyone know his dates? Okay, usually people say it's 469 to 399 BCE. And before I go further, why do I say BCE as opposed to BC? Anyone know? Yeah, go ahead.
Before Common Era,
Before the Common Era. Okay, good. So why do we say Common Era?
to avoid the disagreement because not everybody subscribes to Christ.
Okay, good. That's very good. So in the old days, people wrote BC and AD. I still see a lot of this, and I am surprised. AD, of course, is Latin for Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, right? You think about it, he's not the Lord of the overwhelming majority of the people on this planet. Okay, only something like 31% of the world's population believes that Christ is their Lord. Okay, so with all due respect to Christ, okay, that's not where things stand. So people prefer to use increasingly, okay, BCE, before the Common Era, and CE, Common Era. Okay, so that's just what I still see in print sometimes. People use BC and AD, and hopefully this will go out of use someday. Soon, it's increasingly happening. Okay, so these are the dates for Socrates. Okay, Confucius. Anyone know his dates? Okay, I believe it's 551 to 479 BCE. So as you can see, Confucius lived before Socrates. Okay, I'll mention the two other greats. Okay, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Here's something I learned, by the way, from J. Jankelowitz, our office administrator. I'd never thought of that before. If you take a class in ancient philosophy, and you're trying to figure out who came first, who came next, easy mnemonic, SPA, S-P-A, SPA. Just remember that. You got that. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Okay, I'd never, all these years doing philosophy, I didn't know that when J. Jankelowitz told me this. Okay, so he's on tape. Okay, that's acknowledgement. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Plato's dates are usually seen as, I believe, 428 or 427 to 348 or 347 BCE. Okay, and Aristotle is 384 to 322 BCE. Okay, now the reason I mentioned Aristotle is when you take this class with me, and if you've read some Aristotle, if you've read some of the Nicomachean Ethics, you might have read some in Foundations of Ethics or something else, you'll see there's a lot of similarity between what Confucius has to say about ethics and what Aristotle has to say about ethics. Completely independently of each other. Okay? They're saying very similar things about virtue and character and family and friends and society, all those things. Okay? Except Confucius is doing it about 150 years before Aristotle. Okay? As far as we know, there's no contact between ancient Greece and ancient China at this time. Okay? Okay. We mentioned other figures around this time. Lao Tzu, well, we're not entirely sure if he existed. There's some debate about that, whether Lao Tzu existed or not. But if Lao Tzu existed, he's a little bit older than Confucius. Okay, he's 6th century BCE. Okay, so that's in China. So you can see that's around the same time as the ancient Greeks, the ancient Chinese. Okay, I can mention other philosophers. Okay, but let me stick with these two for now. Okay, in ancient India, okay, the first Hindu text is Rig Veda. Rig Veda goes to around, it's an oral text, okay, passed down by word of mouth, around 1500 BCE. And then we have these great figures. The Buddha was actually born in a country called Nepal, but then spent most of his life in what is today India. Okay, his dates are 563 to 483 BCE. As again, you can see this is not only before Christ, it's also before Socrates. Okay, yes?
Who is Buddha? Isn't like Buddha a religion or a lifestyle?
Okay.
Wasn't his name like, it wasn't Buddha, it was like something else.
Okay, good. So his birth name was Siddhartha Gautam. That's right. Okay, but when he became enlightened, they started calling him Buddha or Buddha. Okay, that literally means the enlightened one. Okay, he is seen as the founder of Buddhism. okay, of Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist religion. Okay, some Buddhists also see him as a deity, as a god. Okay, so that's who he was. But he was a historical human being. He was born in what is today Nepal, that country. Okay, he traveled around northern India, especially. Okay, that's where he gained enlightenment. That's where he preached his sermons. That's why he died. Okay, he was born a prince, and then he gave up the palace. He gave up life. Okay, okay. I'll mention one more figure here. There's another philosophy, another religion that arises in ancient India, a little bit older than the Buddha. Mahavir is seen as one of the founders. His dates are 599. Oops, this chalk keeps falling out.
So these are people you bring up in the class?
Yes, I bring them up in class. I mean, they don't come up physically. I don't bring them up physically. I'm not like, summoning their spirits, But I talk about them. I talk about views associated with them. You'll read texts associated with these traditions. Okay, let me write his dates here. Okay, read ancient texts that go back centuries, that go back before Christ, before Socrates even. Right? That's what you're reading. Okay, all right. Now, let me stop here. I'll say a few more things. But before I do, questions so far? Any thoughts? Yes?
When did these philosophers get translated around, like the first time?
Translated into English? Okay, it's usually seen as, well, he didn't write anything himself. After he died, his students put his teachings together. Okay? But when the first European colonialists started going to India and China, okay, back in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, okay, around that you start having translations of these works into German, into English, into other languages. Okay, so I want to say in the case of some of these texts, it's the early 19th century, late 18th century, around that time. Okay, that's what I want to say. Okay. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, you have another question.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Concerning Buddhism, like every time I think of Buddhism, I usually associate it with like a Chinese lifestyle or Chinese religion.
Oh, good.
And then it was like
Excellent. Excellent, good. So Buddhism spread very widely. Okay, it originated in India, but then it went outside India. Okay, one group of Buddhists, one kind of Buddhism that's called Mahayana Buddhism, went into China, Japan, Korea. Okay, and also into Tibet. Okay, okay. Another kind of Buddhism went south and southeast out of India into Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, or Myanmar. Okay, Laos, Cambodia, all those places. Okay, and of course Buddhism has also come to this country. Okay, you'll find Buddhists in upstate New York or in California or Oregon or Western Massachusetts. Okay, but it spread very widely. Okay, Buddhism as a religion, as a philosophy. Yep, that's right. Great questions. What's your name?
Jerome.
Jerome. Okay, good. Great questions. Okay, terrific questions. Okay, other questions so far? Yes.
You said that it spread and it changed a little bit. Can you talk about some of the distinctions between the different types of Buddhism?
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, so I'll say something very quickly here. Okay, let me just erase this here. Okay. Every great religious tradition has its own sects. Let's take a few examples. Okay, if you take Christianity, you have the Catholic Church, then you have the various Protestant denominations, then you have the Orthodox Church in its different forms, right? You take Islam, you have the Sunnis and the Shiites and the Sufis. Okay, you talk about Judaism, you have the Orthodox, the Conservative, the Reform, the Reconstructionist, right? Buddhism is no exception. After the Buddha died, there was this split within Buddhism internally. All right. Okay. The oldest tradition is what's called the Theravada tradition. Okay, the tradition that broke away, that wanted reform, is sometimes called the Mahayana tradition. Okay, and there's a tradition that is local, quite unique to Tibet. That's sometimes called the Vajrayana tradition. Okay, what are some of the differences here? Okay, so some of the differences between Theravada and Mahayana. Yes, go ahead.
Is there a literal meaning to these words?
Yes, excellent, very good. So Theravada literally means the way of the elders. Okay, Vad, this is interesting. Vad means doctrine. It's a great question you're asking me, because these terms come from Sanskrit. Just like we have Latin and ancient Greek for the European languages, for the Indian languages we have this mother language called Sanskrit. which pretty much no one speaks these days, but the scholars can read Sanskrit, the priests they chant Sanskrit. Okay, so this is now in Sanskrit, the word for voice is vak. What's the word for voice in Latin? Okay, voce. Okay, I was also thinking of vox. Okay, okay, so very similar roots. Okay, voce or vox. Okay, okay. Let's take a few other examples here. Okay, I'm going to actually get out of say bye-bye to Marsilio Ficino, much as though I like him. Okay. The Sanskrit word for mother is matri. What's the word for mother in Latin? Mater, right? Okay. The Sanskrit word for father is pitri. What is the corresponding word here for father? Ata. So you see a lot of similarities linguistically between words for voice, for mother, father. Okay, Theravada means the way of the elders. Mahayan means the greater vehicle. Maha means great, yan means vehicle. Okay, Vajrayan is translated usually as the diamond vehicle. The diamond vehicle, right? That's what it's called. Okay, so okay, so that's what it is. Okay, okay. Now, your question was about the difference between these two. Okay, so some of the differences, scholars usually think of 7 differences in Theravada and Mahayana. Don't worry, I'm not going to run all 7 by you. I probably don't remember all 7 off the top of my head anyway. Okay, but let me mention a couple just to give you an example. Okay, so one difference between Theravada and Mahayana is who is the Buddha or who was the Buddha. Theravada says the Buddha was a human being. He was an extraordinary human being. Okay. Mahayana says the Buddha is just the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautam, who attained enlightenment. He's just one manifestation of a timeless truth, of an eternal reality. Okay? And there are these other celestial beings called bodhisattvas who are very close to enlightenment, but they postpone their enlightenment to help other people because they're compassionate. Okay? So who is the Buddha? The Buddha is a historical human being? No, the Buddha is just one manifestation, one of the bodhisattvas. Okay? He's just one manifestation of this eternal truth. Okay? And there are others, like bodhisattvas. Okay? Another difference. Who can attain enlightenment? Theravada says it's only monks and nuns, Buddhist monks and nuns. These guys say, no, it's not just monks and nuns. Even laypersons can attain enlightenment, so long as they follow the Buddhist path. So as you can see, this is broader in some ways. Okay, this emphasizes compassion a lot. This view is more conservative, it's stricter in some ways. Okay, so that's just a couple of the differences. Historically, these two views have become very close. And if you talk about the present day Dalai Lama, right, the 14th Dalai Lama, he is the Tibetan Buddhists. They follow this tradition, but they're very influenced by this tradition. So I'd say there's a kind of blend. Yeah, okay, that's what's happened there, at least with Tibetan Buddhism. Okay. Other questions, other thoughts? Okay, let me say a few more things. Okay, now, so you're wondering, go back to your question. What are you going to read? Right? Are you going to read these actual texts? Okay, so let me tell you what you're going to read. Okay, so you're going to read selections from, or sometimes complete texts. Okay, such as the following. Okay, you're going to read now this is interesting. The Analects. Okay, now this is not a text that Confucius himself wrote. Confucius himself didn't write anything. Okay, it's interesting. Confucius didn't write anything. Okay, the Buddha didn't write anything. Christ didn't write anything. Socrates didn't write anything. Muhammad didn't write anything. Okay, it's very interesting to think about this. Okay, after Confucius died, his students put his teachings together. The Analects is these little pithy sayings. It's in 20 chapters. Okay, there's a lot of great stuff in there. Okay, it might feel a little bit dry after a while, but there's a lot of insights in there, a lot of great stuff. Some of it will remind you of Aristotle, but he's saying profound stuff, very deep stuff, a lot of wisdom in there. Okay, so they put his teachings together. You'll read selections from the Analects. Okay, that's part of the Confucian tradition. You will read all of this text ascribed to Lao Tzu, though we don't know if Lao Tzu existed, the Tao Te Ching. Now, the Tao Te Ching is the second most translated book in the world. Which is the most translated book in the world? Who can tell me? The Bible. That's right. Okay, this is the second most translated book in the world. Okay, it's a great book. It's one of my favorite books. Okay, great book. Okay, you'll also read. So this book you'll read. We'll spend one whole week on this. You'll read the entire text. It's not a long book. It's about. It's got 81 short chapters. I'd say about 100 pages or even less. Okay, and it's terrific stuff. It's one of my favorite books, like I said. Okay, okay. You'll also read works by Zhuangzi. Zhuangzi is a later Taoist philosopher. Okay, he's in the 4th century before Christ. I want to say 369 to 286 BCE, something like that. Okay, but you'll read selections from the book of Zhuangzi. You'll read the first 7 chapters or selections from there. Okay, the first 7 chapters are called the inner chapters. What are some of the other texts you read? Okay, just like when you do ancient philosophy, you read Plato, you read Aristotle. Just like when you take modern philosophy, you read Descartes, you read Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Kant. You're reading original sources here. Okay, and we'll discuss these passages. We'll ask questions about them. We'll see how they're relevant for us today. If they're right or wrong, okay, we'll ask those questions. Okay. Okay. Now, let me say something here very quickly. Before I go on to the Indian tradition, mention some of the Indian texts. Some of these works actually influenced Western philosophers. Okay, there's some reason to think that some of the things that Lao Tzu is saying in the Tao Te Ching, okay, sounds like some of the things that Derrida, the great French philosopher, Jacques Derrida, usually seen as a deconstructionist, is saying about language. They're very skeptical of language, of using our concepts in a rigid way, in a logocentric kind of way. Okay, so they don't like that. They want us to use our concepts in a flexible way. Okay, so that's something. Okay, now when we go to the Indian tradition, you'll read from the Upanishads. The Upanishads are these ancient Hindu texts, written or composed orally, rather I should say first, before they were written down. Okay, roughly sometime between 800 BC and 300 BC, around that time. They're passed on by word of mouth from father to son for generations, and they're written down. They're about the nature of reality. Okay, again, there's some reason to think that Schopenhauer, the great German philosopher, he read the Upanishads. He is influenced by them. Okay, if you've read Schopenhauer, if you've heard about the will, okay, that sounds a lot like, okay, this concept of Brahman in the Upanishads. Brahman, ultimate reality. Okay, it's something that you cannot capture in words. It's meant to be experienced mystically. It's the ground of all things, the invisible essence of all things. Okay, somebody who thinks maybe Hegel, when he's talking about the absolute, may also have come across some of this stuff. Okay, okay. I'll make you read the Bhagavad Gita. That's an ancient Hindu text which talks about duty. Okay. Sometimes people have compared what the Bhagavad Gita says about ethics to Kant on duty. Okay, if you've read Kant's ethics, if you've read all that stuff on the categorical imperative, right, on the goodwill, right, a lot of the things that Kant is saying about a duty-based ethics, you find resonances here, except this is much before Kant. Okay, this is centuries before Kant. Okay, you'll read selections from these early Buddhist texts called the Nikayas, which were written right after the Buddha died. Okay, you'll read perhaps the most famous and the most influential Buddhist philosopher after the Buddha is a Mahayana philosopher called Nagarjuna. You'll read selections from Nagarjuna. Okay, okay. You'll read. Don't think he was a bodhisattva. Well, some might take it that way. Okay, you'll read selections from his great work, which influenced Buddhism greatly in Tibet, in China, in Japan, in Korea, and so forth. Okay. Okay. Questions so far? Other questions? Other thoughts? How are we doing time? Oh, we have lots of time. Lots of time. Okay. Let's have some cookies or drinks. Lots of cookies here. Yep. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was wondering how something like a philosophy turns into like a full-blown religion like Confucianism and Buddhism.
How it turned into that. Okay. So what happened in Confucianism is very interesting. In his own lifetime, Confucius had a hard time persuading rulers of the Chinese states at that time to adopt his ways. Okay, he went from one state to another. Okay, at that time, and then, but after he died, his ideas were adopted by the Chinese state. Okay, they had people read the Confucian texts. There are other Confucian texts written by later Confucian thinkers. Okay, that we'll read selections from, and they had this kind of civil service exam for the mandarins, where they had to master the Confucian texts. Okay, but through state adoption and state support, Confucianism became a very strong force in Chinese culture and society as it evolved. Is Confucianism a religion? That's a great question. Some people see it as a religion, okay? Some don't. If you ask people about the 5 major religions of the world today, okay, in terms of number of people mention Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, okay? But I've also seen some thinkers, I mentioned this philosopher called Ninian Smart. Ninian Smart is a very interesting figure. Ninian Smart trained as a philosopher, trained as an analytic philosopher, just like myself or Andrew Arlig, my colleague, who's teaching philosophy of religion. And then he went into religious studies. And he founded a great department of religious studies at UC Santa Barbara. Okay, in fact, he was sometimes called the father of religious studies. Ninian Smart also adds Confucianism and Taoism to these other 5 religions that I mentioned. Okay, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism. He says there are 7 great religions in the world. Confucianism, Taoism, and that. Now, the thing about Confucianism, though, is Confucianism is a secular humanism. Okay, or it's an ethical and social humanism. Okay, now Confucius doesn't talk about the gods or about the afterlife or spirits. Okay, it doesn't talk much about those things. Okay, so that's it's a secular. It's also humanist. What does that mean to be humanist? Who knows that? Who or what is a humanist? Anyone know? Not Anatoly, he knows this. He teaches here too, like me. Okay, a humanist says when it comes to our ideals, when it comes to what kind of people we should be, we look at the best human beings. We try and emulate them. We try and follow their practices. We follow their example, whether it's Confucius or the Buddha or Christ or someone else. Okay? So they don't appeal to God or to spirits or the afterlife or death or other things. That's what they do. So in Confucianism, there's no God. Right? Now, you could take Confucius himself as a god. Maybe some later Confucians tend to do that, close to doing that. But that's what. So is Confucianism a religion? That's a question. Okay, that I think you should ask. Yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
Maybe it's a stupid question. So,
No, there's no stupid questions.
great religions. Are they great in terms of the numbers of people that
Good.
practice them?
Excellent.
Or the great in terms of the value of ideas?
Okay. I think it's probably more in terms of value of ideas. Because if you think about the numbers of people who practice them, Judaism does not have as many followers, as many practitioners as this other religion I'm going to mention, Sikhism. Okay, I believe there are more Sikhs in the world today than Jews. Okay, but Sikhism hasn't been around as long. It goes back to about the 15th century or so. Okay, Judaism goes back thousands of years. Okay, it's had a bigger influence, a wider influence, a longer influence, if you like. Okay, so again, that's why I said it's debatable. Some people say 5, some say 7, some might say 9 or more. Okay, scholars of religion disagree about these things. Okay, well, Scientology is not considered a great religion. It hasn't been around that long.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know. Some people might call it a cult. Okay, I'm actually being filmed here, so I don't want Tom Cruise to see this. So okay, I gotta be careful here. Okay, all right. Okay, so yeah. Okay, all right. Other questions? Yep.
What can be said about the growing of one religion over another? So a while ago, Christianity was the leading religion in the world.
Yep.
But now there's little by little historians saying that, and over time there's a trend of more people following Islam than Christianity than ever before.
Okay,
and
so
is that counted into what the 7 major religions in the world?
yes, Islam is there, absolutely.
No. I'm saying the growing of a religion. Over
Yes. When they study these things, scholars of religion, they look at how religion changes, including the number of people who follow it. Now, what accounts for that? I think there's a couple of things at least that we can say, and you can add more to this. One is demographic changes, right? The population of Asia, of the Middle East more broadly, is growing. Okay, that's one thing. Something else that's happening is the West is becoming more and more secular, less religious. Fewer people go to church in the US today than, let's say, 100 years back. Okay? Same thing's happening in Western Europe. Okay? Christianity, where it's growing mainly, is in Latin America, South America, Africa, and Asia. Right? That's what's happening. Okay. I saw something else recently in the news. The Catholic Church is going to allow priests to marry.
Really?
Right. There's some discussion of this.
There's discussion.
Pope Francis supports this at least. Okay, because they need more priests, male priests. Okay. But let's see what happens. Okay, let's see what happens. But there are changes. Okay, and there are demographic changes. Okay, birth rates are higher in some parts of the world, in Asia or Africa, than they are in the United States. Okay. Okay. Other questions? Other thoughts? Okay. All right. Now let me say a few other things here. Okay, which I was going to say. Now, so these are some of the texts that you'll read from. This you'll read the entire text. Okay, this you'll read the entire text. You'll read selections from many of the others. Okay, the original texts, they go back centuries, they go back before Christ. Okay, they're great works, a lot of them. Now, let me say something about some of the issues that come up in a class like this. I mean, let's just think about this. Look, we're all Homo sapiens, right? We all have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? Whether we are white or black or brown or yellow or red or green or blue or whatever color, right? We're all human beings, we're all Homo sapiens. It's not surprising, therefore, that they have the same kind of concerns that you find in Western philosophy. Okay, sometimes they say very similar things, sometimes they say very different things. And again, that shouldn't surprise us because this is a different milieu, historically, culturally, that these guys are philosophizing in. Okay, so let me just give you a quick flavor of some of the kind of things you find in some of these views. Okay, there's a whole variety of views. Within classical Chinese philosophy, there's 7 different philosophies that I'll tell you something about, mainly Confucianism and Taoism. Okay, within Indian philosophies, I'll tell you mainly about Hindu and Buddhist philosophies, but you'll also learn about other philosophies. So let's just talk say some things about these things here. Let me just take a few examples here, okay? Across the board. Okay, I'll mention just one more Chinese philosophy, okay, that you may not have heard of. I'll mention the words, okay? Okay, so the Confucians, what's going around this time? When the Confucians and Taoists and Mohists are philosophizing when they're alive, there's a lot of turmoil in China at that time. Okay, all these states are fighting each other. Okay, people are dying. They don't have food to eat. Okay, society is in disorder. Okay, how do you order society? How do you make it peaceful and harmonious? How do you order your own life? Okay, how do you lead a fulfilled life? Okay, and Confucius says, you cultivate virtues like humanity. You follow certain rituals that discipline your mind. You cultivate certain relationships, okay, with family and friends. Okay. Okay, and there's more things I could add, but just to mention a few things. Okay, you do these things, that'll order society, it'll order your life. Okay, if everyone does these things, it'll order your life. Okay, he also emphasizes the ruler being very virtuous, the ruler being setting an example for the people, right, inspiring people to be good. Okay, so that's the kind of thing he's saying. I said earlier that a lot of this is reminiscent of Aristotelian ethics. If you read the Nicomachean Ethics, you probably read some selections. A lot of things that Confucius says about character, about how habits are formed from early childhood. There's a lot of good stuff in the Confucian tradition, okay, on moral psychology, on ethics, on character, all these things. Okay? Turn to these guys, the Taoists. They don't like a lot of this stuff that the Confucians say. They think this is very artificial, having these rituals. Okay? Rather than say we've got to go back to the way of nature. We've got to cultivate spontaneity. Okay? And lead a simple life. So they have a very different solution to this social disorder and chaos. How do you order your own life? How do you order society? Okay? Simplify your life. Have simple desires. Okay? Don't need to go for all these artificial rituals. It's just for show, outward show. Okay? Taoism is more reflective. It's more quietistic. It's more meditative, if you like. More inward looking. Okay? Confucianism is more outward looking. Okay. Later in China, as this philosophy called Neo-Confucianism came to be, right? These two were reconciled. Okay, they were kind of combined into one big philosophy. Because they're both saying good things. They're saying good things about society. They're saying good things about nature. Okay. Okay. The Buddhists, by the time they get to China, they're saying good things about the self, or even before they get to China. Okay. This is another school of philosophy in ancient China. Okay. The Mohists. They are the first critics of the Confucians. Okay. They say that, look, you don't need rituals. They're anti-rituals. They say that, look, these rituals that the Confucians want, they want these court ceremonies, they want musical ceremonies, they want elaborate funeral ceremonies when people die. The Mohists say, look, you don't need that. Most people don't have the time or the money to practice these elaborate funeral rituals or play music in the courts. Okay, okay. The Mohists are very much for common people. Okay, the Mohists are also utilitarians. Now, again, another point of similarity between Eastern philosophy, Asian philosophy, and Western philosophy. You probably all come across Bentham and Mill. If you've taken Foundations of Ethics, for example, you come across this idea of maximizing happiness, of trying to achieve the greatest happiness, the greatest number of people. The Mohists say, like Bentham and Mill, except they are 2,000 years before Bentham and Mill, the Mohists say that, look, what's good has to benefit everyone. What's good has to be useful for everyone. It can't just benefit the elite in the Confucian courts. It's got to be useful to the masses. Okay, that's what they say. Okay, okay. Something else you find in the Mohists? The Mohists are impartialists. What does that mean? Okay. Again, the contrast here is with the Confucian tradition. Okay, for the Confucians, family and friends are very important. You care for everyone, but you have greater care for your family and friends. Okay, this idea is sometimes called partiality. Okay, you've probably come across it in Western ethics also. If you've read Aristotle, Aristotle's here. Okay, if you've read Kant or the Stoics, they are here. You treat everyone equally from a moral point of view. Okay, and the Mohists say this is exactly, partiality is exactly what causes all the problems, causes corruption, causes nepotism. There's a famous or infamous passage in the Analects where Confucius talks about covering up for your father when he's stealing sheep. Okay, that's where filial piety or loyalty lies. That's where virtue lies. Okay, and these guys don't like that. They say, no, from a moral point of view, everyone is equal. From a social point of view, from the point of etiquette, maybe things are slightly different. Okay, if you're hungry and a stranger is hungry, their hunger is no different from your hunger. You divide a loaf of bread equally between yourself and the stranger. Okay, but you don't have to say happy birthday to the stranger on the street. You don't have to keep track of their birthdays, right? Or have Facebook remind you. Right, today is this stranger's birthday, this stranger on the street, on the subway. Okay? Okay, send them a wish now, right on their timeline. Okay? Okay, you're not obliged to do that. Okay, so that's about etiquette. Okay? So you see here that there's a debate going on. These philosophers disagree with each other, just like you see in Western philosophy, just like you see in the ancient Greeks, or in 17th and 18th century philosophy, or in more recent philosophy. Okay? And there's a lot of similarity with Western philosophy also. Okay? All right, that's some flavor of Chinese philosophy. I will tell you similarly something about some of the Indian philosophies. By no means is this exhaustive. There are other Chinese philosophies I'll talk about, legalism, Yangism, the yin-yang school and school of names. But I don't want to throw too much at you. But before I go to Indian philosophy, do something similar. Let me see if you're with me so far. If you have any questions, any other thoughts, any other questions. Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, good, excellent. So one of the great things about Taoism is that many of these Taoist ideas went into many East Asian practices, like martial arts, like calligraphy, okay, where you don't plan ahead or think ahead too much in a rigid way. You respond to reality in a way that's flexible, in a way that's changing. A good example I can use is playing jazz. When you play jazz, right, you have some sense of the chord structure before you go in, right? But then you're kind of more in the moment. You're here and now. You don't have a rigid preconception. You improvise, you extemporize. That's what you do. That's what spontaneity involves. Okay, whether it's martial arts or calligraphy or other arts of East Asia, in China, in Japan, in Korea, elsewhere. Okay. It takes cultivation. It takes time. Right. It takes tutoring. You practice it. You don't become a good jazz player overnight. It's not like you pick up the trumpet or the double bass one day and you go, no. You have to train. You have to learn. Okay, but that's what you do. Yes, Anatoly.
So an example of spontaneity, like in moral aspect, what would that be?
In ethics, in the ethical sphere?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So here's something that comes up, a term that's thrown up a lot in Western meta-ethics, particularism. You may have come across this term. Okay, we associate that with Confucius, also with Aristotle. The idea is that, look, the moral life is complex. The moral life is heterogeneous. Each situation is unique. You look at each situation on its own merits without having this rigid preconception that this is always wrong or this is always right. Okay? I'm going to contrast this with a very famous or infamous example. Usually this is contrasted with a trend in meta-ethics called generalism. And maybe you need both. Maybe you need to be attentive to each situation, but also treat like cases like. Okay? There's a very famous or infamous example in some of Kant's writings. Kant, of course, says, don't lie. Don't ever tell a lie, right? And someone raised a problem for him, said, what if you're sitting at home and an innocent person comes and says, save me, save me, save me. There's a mob out to lynch me. Okay? And Kant says, you shouldn't lie. You shouldn't hide him in your house. Because let's say, hypothetically, you hide him in your house, and then the mob comes 10 minutes later, and the mob asks, where is this guy? You say, oh, he went that way. And unknown to you, this guy went out the back door that way.
Right.
Not only would he be caught and killed, but you would also have lied. So Kant says, don't lie, don't ever lie. Okay? Now, particularists would say, yes, you should not lie in general. But if lying is the only way to save an innocent life, if that's the only way to do it, then do it. 99 times out of 100, you should not lie. But maybe there's an exception to be made in a case like this. Okay? So there's a certain spontaneity, a certain flexibility here. Okay? That's how we apply it, at least when it comes to this kind of debate within ethics and meta-ethics. Okay? So that's what he said. Okay? Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
I have a question, because you mentioned that Confucianism is considered like for the elite class because of the expense and time consuming. But I remember learning at some point that Confucius was very pro studying and learning. So did he want everyone to become elite by studying, or was it only for the elites that they should study?
No, when he's talking about these rituals, this is the criticism raised by these Mohists. Okay, the Mohists have working class origins. Okay, they say that these rituals, most people don't have the time or the money or the luxury to engage in these rituals. Okay, one of the rituals was when your father dies, you mourn for 3 years. Okay, you live in a hut outside the house. You don't wear fine clothes. You don't eat rice, which I believe was a delicacy in northern China those days. Okay, and yeah, that was the idea. Okay, and the Mohists say that's excessive. Okay, that's going to lead to loss of productivity. Most people don't have the time for this or the money for this. Okay, so that elitism here is directed at the stress on rituals here. Okay, now when he's talking about studying, yes, you follow certain virtues. You read the later Confucian texts. That's the later Confucians who come after him. Okay, there's people like Mengzi and Sun Tzu and others who come after him. They emphasize that. Okay, that's what happens. Other questions so far? Other thoughts? Yes.
So these two forms of religion were all being practiced in China during the time of turmoil?
Yes, these arose in China around the 6th century BCE, okay? And they've had a massive influence on Chinese society and culture, especially Confucianism, okay? Today what's happening, I believe, is that, look, under the communist regime, okay, these were a little bit suppressed. Communism is officially atheistic, okay? But I believe last few years, last few decades or so, these are coming back a little bit. There's some practice of these things that's more prevalent now than they used to be. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, communism is atheistic?
Yes, communism is atheistic, yes. It's not the same thing, but communists are atheists. You don't believe in God, right? You have some sense of this, right? You probably know more about communism than me.
There were interesting stories, though. You know, for example, in Moscow, they were trying to build the statue of Lenin, and they were trying to follow the same route
Right,
that
that's
the
right.
Orthodox Church
Yes.
was doing,
Yeah.
as they were, you know, doing on Christmas
Yes,
and
that's
all
right.
of these things.
That's right.
But dedicated to Lenin.
Lenin, yeah. So
They
Lenin
were
was,
trying to make a new Jesus out
yeah,
of
so
it.
Lenin was a new god.
That
That's
was
right.
very
Yes, that's right.
interesting.
That's right, yeah. Lenin or Stalin or whoever.
Or Mao, right?
Or Mao in China, yes. Yeah, that's right.
Isn't communism like a form of government? Like where everyone's on the same plane, no matter what kind of work you do? Like,
True, that's true. But when it came to religion, when it came to God, okay, the government says, don't follow religion. okay, don't go to church. There's no God. Officially denies God. That's my understanding. I've never lived in a communist country officially, so this is just what I've read and heard. Okay.
Well, don't forget, the communism was largely based on Marxist writings, and he's talking about it's the economy stupid, right?
Right,
And
yes,
he said, look,
yes.
it's all
That's right,
economic.
that's right.
There's got to be nothing supernatural there. So as we follow our scientific investigation, therefore we should not believe in these things. And that's why all these.
Yep. Class struggle, all that stuff. Yes, that's right. Okay. That's okay. Okay, I will turn over to the Indian tradition now. Okay, so that's just some ideas in classical Chinese philosophy, just to give you some flavor. You see already there are some similarities with Western philosophy. He's saying many things like Aristotle's ethics. Okay, these guys are saying many things like Bentham and Mill. Right, you see some similarities. Okay, let me say something very quickly about 3 Indian philosophies that we will. Okay. Read from their original text. Okay, I'm kind of running out of space here, but I'll mention one more here. Okay, so let's go back to the Hindu text, the Upanishads, which influenced Schopenhauer, possibly also Hegel. All right, they talk about reality. Okay, reality is unchanging. Reality consists of the supreme consciousness, okay, which is ineffable, cannot be captured in words. That's the underlying ground of all things. Okay, they call it Brahman, a word I used earlier. They talk about the self. What is the nature of the self? The nature of the self, a lot of Hindu philosophies say, and there's 6 different kinds of Hindu philosophies. I won't go through all 6. I'll go through many of them, including yoga. Okay. They say the nature of the self is not your material. It's not your empirical waking self. Your true self is pure consciousness. It is of the same nature as ultimate reality. And you realize your true self, you're released from delusion. You're released from ignorance when you realize your true self, that your true self is of the nature of reality. Same reality. It's consciousness. Okay? You do this through following a path of ethics, detachment, meditation, and so forth. Okay? So they also emphasize ethics. And especially, it's a duty-based ethics. Okay, in that respect, sometimes some Hindu ethics is compared to Kant's ethics. Kant's ethics also emphasizes duty, as you might recall if you've read Kant's groundwork or grounding, as it's translated these days sometimes. Okay, so that's that. Okay. Now, the Buddhists have a very different take. Okay, one way to understand Buddhism, especially early Buddhist philosophy, is to see it as reacting to early Hindu philosophy. Okay, these guys say reality is never changing. Buddhists have a very different view. They say no, reality is always changing. Reality is always in flux. Okay, it's sometimes called a process ontology. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is constant. Everything changes. Again, let me relate this to something in Western philosophy. If you've taken ancient philosophy, you've probably read some Heraclitus. Right? Heraclitus said, you cannot step into the same river twice. Right? River's always flowing. It's not static. It's not constant. It's not permanent. That's what they say about reality. It's a fundamental idea in Buddhist philosophy. Reality is always changing. It's dynamic. It's not constant. It's in flux. Okay? And we don't grasp this. We crave permanence. We want our loved ones to be with us all the time. We want to look the way we did when we were 18 or 20. Okay? As we grow older, we have gray hair, we lose hair. Okay? We have beer bellies, things start to sag and droop, whatever. Right? Okay? We want to go back to the way we look. Okay? That's hard. That's tough. Okay? So what they say is, once you realize this is nature reality, you're going to be released from suffering. We all go through this thing called dukkha, this profound unsatisfactoriness with the world. But once you realize things are going to change,
You said dukkha?
dukkha is the word for suffering. Dukkha. We all suffer. Okay? And the path to this, to be released from suffering, is to follow the Buddhist path, follow a path of ethics, Buddhist ethics, follow a path of detachment, non-violence, all these things, meditation, all these things. Okay? Okay? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, okay. So that's roughly some of the ideas. Again, you'll read from the original text. Okay? One of the things I do is I do question these philosophers. I question these texts. I think there's a lot of wonderful things all these guys are saying. There's also things you should question. Just like we do with Western philosophy, just like we do with Plato or Aristotle, Hume, Kant, Aquinas. Yeah, go ahead, Anatoly.
The whole reincarnation idea.
Okay, good, good. That's here. And that's a great segue to these guys. Because these guys say there is no such thing as rebirth, reincarnation. Okay, so in ancient India, this is the only school of philosophy that rejects reincarnation, rebirth. Okay, all right, they say there's only one life to live. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, that means they reject the caste system then.
Say that again?
They reject the.
The Buddhists reject the caste system. These guys, the Charvak. Okay, the Charvak, it's interesting. We don't know too much about them directly because they were caricatured, they were lampooned because they said things like this. They were also atheists. They denied the gods. They were also materialists. Okay, this is a lot like a lot of contemporary Western philosophy. Okay, they believe that all that exists is matter in different arrangements or configurations of matter. Okay, they were also empiricists. They believe that all knowledge comes from sense experience only. In fact, some of the things they said about induction are like Hume, except that they are 2,000 years before Hume. All right, they're saying very similar things. Okay, all right. They were also ethical hedonists. The only thing we should value for its own sake is pleasure. Everything else is a means to pleasure. Okay, now they were caricatured. People often said, oh, they are saying eat, drink, and be merry. They were not saying that. They were very well aware, like the Epicureans, that excess pleasure leads to pain. Okay, you eat too much, you'll have trouble, health issues. You drink too much, you'll have other issues. Okay, they're very well aware of that. Okay, they were also vegetarians. They're opposed to animal sacrifice. There's a lot of talk of animal sacrifice in the Hindu texts, the Vedas. Okay, these guys oppose that, so do they. Okay, so again you see there are themes, there are ideas within Indian philosophy, classical Indian philosophy, as in classical Chinese philosophy. That's a lot like Western philosophy. There's also some differences. Okay, I haven't said very much today about some of the ideas in Taoism. Taoism in some ways is very different from a lot of Western philosophy, and it's great. Okay, and there are later developments in Eastern philosophies which I may mention something in passing about. I don't spend too much time on them, but if you want to learn something about Zen Buddhism, for example, okay, understand Zen, you can see Zen, one way of understanding Zen is to see it as a synthesis, as a blend, as a confluence of Taoism, of some Hindu ideas, especially in yoga, and Buddhism, especially Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, and that's what happens. Okay. All right, questions, thoughts. Happy to take your questions. You had a question a little while back, I thought. Okay, all right. Okay. So you see here, they ask similar kind of questions, similar kind of themes as in Western philosophy. They talk about ethics, they talk about society, they talk about the gods, they talk about knowledge, they talk about reality, they talk about the self, they talk about self-realization, or self-fulfillment, or enlightenment, flourishing. Okay, similar themes and ideas. Not surprising, like I said. Also, Homo sapiens, 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? Same species. Very similar concerns, okay? Sometimes I say this, what explains the similarity between Confucian ethics and Aristotelian ethics? Well, they're very similar societies. They're agrarian societies, right? Much before the Industrial Revolution. There are all these warring states that are fighting each other. In ancient Greece, it's Athens and Sparta. In ancient China, there's other states like that, okay? People are in rough times. They don't have food to eat. They're dying, okay? How do you sort things out, society? How do you lead your own life? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
You said earlier that out of all these philosophers, you were challenging. So out of all of them, which one did you have a problem?
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I try and raise questions about all of them, okay? Okay, right. So with Confucianism, for example, great stuff in Confucianism, don't get me wrong, okay? There's a reason why Confucianism has had such an enduring influence, because it's very profound. It's saying very good things about virtue, about moral psychology. But you have to wonder sometimes, yes, does this go too far? You have to wonder sometimes, does the partiality go too far? Okay, they're raising very good questions, okay, about these guys, okay? Okay, so I try to play devil's advocate. I try to probe, raise questions, just as you've seen me in metaphysics, right? I raise questions about David Lewis or about Kripke, okay? So, yeah.
So in regards to rituals, you said earlier that Confucius had this idea that rituals should be used as a means of disciplining the mind.
Yes.
So wouldn't you say it's possible to then repurpose that rather than having to go through the ritual that he listed of 3 years or so, but rather just to signify the importance of disciplining
Good.
the mind in today's
Good.
perspective?
Yes, you could do that, and later Confucians do things like that. There's also something else about rituals. Rituals are done with other people in an open, shared way. In that sense, they can help cultivate bonding. You have the sense of fellowship. Your fellow believers. It's like if anyone here goes regularly to a church or a mosque or a temple or a synagogue, right? You have your fellow believers. You meet them regularly, once a week or whatever, right? You have kind of bond with them. So when you do rituals in a public way with other people, they help focus your mind, tame your mind, discipline your mind, and they help foster this kind of bonding that Confucius wants. Okay, the most important virtue in Confucianism is called Ren. Ren is translated as humanity or benevolence. Okay, it's a virtue. Yeah, it talks about various virtues, Ren, Li, Yi, and so forth. Okay, yeah.
So your definition of ritual is it's actual or in the context of Confucianism?
In the context of Confucianism, these are the virtues.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Okay, that's right. Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned that Buddhism and Hinduism were, they like sacrifice and things like that. Were they like monotheistic or polytheistic?
Okay, good, excellent. So Hinduism definitely is polytheistic. Okay, no question about that. Okay, there's an old metaphor they use. There are 330 million gods in Hinduism. Now it's not like someone had a census, one for every American. 330 million Americans, one Hindu god for every American. It's not like they had a census. It's a metaphor. What happens is you have these main deities in the Hindu tradition, and then sometimes the local tree in a village might also be regarded as a deity, as a god. Okay, that's what happens. Okay, and there's all kinds of myths and so forth. In the Buddhist tradition, I mentioned the difference between Theravada and Mahayana. Theravada does not have gods or deities. In the Mahayana tradition, which you find in Tibet, in China, Japan, Korea, right, all these bodhisattvas are seen as like gods. They are celestial creatures. They are close to enlightenment, but they postpone their enlightenment to help other people. They are compassionate. There are all kinds of Mahayana Buddhist deities. There's a goddess called Tara. Okay, there's another bodhisattva called Amitabh. Amitabh, by the time he goes to China and Japan, his name has become Amida. Okay, so you hear about people in Japan practicing a form of Buddhism called Pure Land Buddhism. They worship the Amida Buddha. Has anyone heard this? Pure Land Buddhism?
I've heard of Buddhism, but you're breaking it down to divisions. I haven't got it.
Okay, all right. Okay, then I won't go there unless you really want me to. Okay, so that's what happens. Okay, yeah. Other
Like
questions?
the idea of other people being Buddhist, like
Bodhisattvas, yes. Bodhisattvas, yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. There's all kinds of stories. I'll mention, just like we have Aesop's fables in the West, right? In the Buddhist tradition, you have what are called Jatak tales. These are stories, Buddhist stories, about all these creatures, deer and other creatures, that are actually bodhisattvas, that are very compassionate, that help other creatures. The deer sacrifices her life to save the crow from the hunter. There are stories like that. Okay, so they're fascinating stories. Okay, I should also add, I've been teaching this class for over 20 years. Some version of this class I've taught not just here at Brooklyn College. I've also taught at other places. Okay, and so I'm always very happy to teach this, and I think I know something, thing or two maybe, about all this stuff. Okay. Other questions? Other thoughts? No? If you have questions about the class, okay, you can email me. I'll write my email address here. Okay, my office, by the way, is right next door. Okay. Okay, that's my last name, Trivedi at Brooklyn. .cuny.edu. Okay, class meets, like I said, next semester, Tuesday, Thursdays, 11, 12, 15. And as I said, you can take my class on Thursday afternoons, grab a quick bite, and then go to my colleague Andrew Ardy's class in philosophy of religion. Okay, the two classes are related. They both count towards our religion minor. Okay, both Andrew Arlig and I are affiliated with our multidisciplinary religion program. And, you know, it's kind of quite convenient. You'll also see some connections, okay, between the two classes. Okay. Other questions? Happy to take your questions. I don't have very much more to say in terms of, you know, explaining stuff or doing stuff. Yeah, Anatoly, go ahead.
So, is there somewhere? I had a conversation with somebody, and he said that in Hinduism there's this notion of these bodhisattvas and incarnations, like you can interpret them in terms of
Bodhisattvas are here.
Buddhism. So you can interpret them as laws of physics kind of things. Would that be something?
I think you could do that. One of the things you find very often people do is they look at contemporary developments in science and technology, and they say, look at these ancient texts. They were saying things like this. Or they were predicting. Now, I think that's up for interpretation. Okay. Whether some ancient text predicted self-driving cars. Okay. I think it's up for debate. I think.
Straightforward as that.
Right.
Look, I go to consciousness conferences, and there are quite a lot of people who are talking about
Yes,
these things.
of course, yes.
And they are presenting consciousness as being one or other aspect of this whole thing.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they're saying, well, that's kind of related to the laws of physics and so on and so on. So
Yeah.
there is a tradition of
Yes,
interpreting.
yes, that's right. Yeah, you can find
So
some.
how much sorry to interrupt.
Go
How
ahead.
much value do you see in that? How much warranted? How warranted are those intents are?
Okay, I think the devil is always in the details. You have to see what exactly they are saying, what text or passage they're referring to, okay, what contemporary scientific or technological developments they're referring to. Okay, I'm open to that myself. I don't do it much myself. You won't find me at consciousness conferences, saying these things. Okay, but there are some people who I think do it better than other people. They're more genuine. They're more sincere. There are some people who are it's speculation in other cases. And
so quantum physics gets quite a lot of.
yes, of course it does. Of course it does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, and there are connections, I'm sure, with consciousness and quantum physics. And quantum physics is, of course, fascinating in its own right, even apart from this stuff. Okay, so yeah, certainly. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? You have a question here? No? Okay.
Sounds yummy.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Come and take it. I have a lot of fun. I should also add, I got one of my degrees in India, one of my philosophy degrees. So I know probably know more about Indian philosophy than anyone else here in this department. Okay. 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 All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Okay. Take some cookies.